Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our open house today.
Hello.
Hello,
Just letting
Sarah.
everyone get, hello, letting everyone get
Hello.
connected and settled in. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Well, we are busy preparing for our 5th year here at Lotus and Ivy. We start classes on Tuesday, September 2nd. And for our 5th year in a row, we're hosting our open house here in August, sorry, so that you can be here and meet our teachers and hear from them firsthand. We will have a brief presentation, and then our teachers will speak. And then at the end, there is time for you to ask questions. So if you have questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat or save them to the end. Well, as you probably know, Lotus and Ivy is a Waldorf program. And this means that our teachers are all Waldorf trained teachers. They've gone through special teacher training and they all have many, many years of experience. We're excited to have you hear from them today. The Waldorf curriculum is very special, and we like to just spend a few minutes to give that a little bit more time before we dive into our open house. Let's see, I am not able to, let me try this. Here we go. Okay. The Waldorf curriculum is very special. If you've had experience watching a student or witnessing a student who comes from a traditional schooling, like maybe what you and I perhaps grew up with, and then you watch them, the same students, in a Waldorf setting. Some of you might have had the experience doing that. I know with myself in a Waldorf, teaching in a Waldorf school and teaching in a homeschool program, I've seen both students who come from a traditional mainstream program and they're new to the Waldorf curriculum. And what I've seen is that at first there's a wall and they're very rigid and they're scared even. And pretty quickly, I would say within a couple of days, they find themselves, and it's noticeable even to an observer how calm they become. They have this sense of calm that comes over them. I think the students that I've known, they develop a lot more interests than they've had before. So they find things because our curriculum lends itself to so many different topics. They find new things that they're interested in doing and learning about. And they also experience just this joy for learning and even coming to class. We often hear that our students, not just at Lotus and Ivy, but Waldorf students in general, they don't dread going to school like we hear from so many other students. So we have a slide here just telling you a little bit more about how Waldorf education is so much more than a curriculum and how it really meets the child at a much deeper level. At Lotus and Ivy, we believe that math and science and reading and writing are, of course, extremely important. And but in addition to that, the Waldorf curriculum gives students the chance to find their creativity and their innovation and their unique gifts that maybe they wouldn't have had time or the space to uncover in another setting. Um, we focus a lot on the students' physical health, which is so important with our cooking classes, our movement classes, and homeschool students in general tend to have more time to take on some sports teams, or we have students who are professional athletes at Lotus and Ivy. So all of this you're going to hear a little bit more about from our teachers in just a few minutes. But first, we wanted to share with you an activity that Heather and I created that will help you if you're still trying to figure out what you really want for your student this year.
Hi, everybody. My name is Heather Parrish, and I'm the other director here at Lotus and Ivy. And it is my honor to share this values and education segment with you. We have put together this handout, and if it's something that you're interested in getting, you can put your email in the chat or send us a quick email at the end of this presentation to Lotus and Ivy virtual classes at gmail.com, and we'll be glad to share this 5-page document with you so that you can work on your values for your children's education. Have you ever really taken the time to think about what you value for each of your children for their education? And yes, I did say each of your children because your values may vary depending on each of your children's interests or their ages or the stage of development that they're in right now. And that being said, what you value for your first child right now, you may value something completely different a year or even a year or two from now. So it is important to do this activity each year for each child so that you can really hone in on what type of education you're really looking for your child. So I just want to give you a quick overview of what this activity entails. It will take you an hour or two. So you would want to set aside some time, make a pot of tea, and have some quiet time for yourself. You would take the values cards that are found on page 4 and 5 of our activity. And some of those values, I'll just share a few with you, are adventure, creativity, friendships, the outdoors, nature, mindfulness, brain development, magic, wonder, excellence, critical thinking. So we all have different values and ideas about education, about things that we think are really important. And so you would take these pages and even create some of your own if ones that you value are not here. And you would want to narrow it down to three, really three. If you're getting it down to three, you're doing really good. But if you can't get it down to three, get it down to five. So for each child, and then look at those values and say to yourself, okay, these are the things that I really value for this child. What type of education is going to give these things to my child? And in many, many cases, Waldorf education and Waldorf-inspired education can meet these values for your child. I just wanted to share a quick story with you all of a family who's been with Lotus and Ivy for 3 years, but they started with Lotus and Ivy on a bit of a rocky start because they came to us. They had a flood near their home, which flooded their home. And because of the water, they ended up getting mold in their home. And so they had to move, and they were staying in hotels and staying with friends. But mom knew that she didn't want to send her daughter to public school. She knew that wasn't for her. So she searched and she searched. And even though it took a couple of months to find Lotus and Ivy, she did her due diligence. She made the phone calls. She hopped on Zoom with one of our directors, which happened to have been me at that time. And we talked about the things that she was looking for her daughter. And we said, you know what? Why don't you give Lotus and Ivy a try? Every one of our new students has a trial period of the first 4 weeks that they're enrolled with us. And so she said, you know what? I'm going to do that because it's worth it to me to do that, to know that this program is going to work for my child. So she did, and her daughter on the second day, I got an email from this woman, and she was so happy. She said she was crying. She was so happy to see her daughter, so excited to attend class, and it just took 2 days. So I hope that you can have a similar story, whether your child attends Lotus and Ivy or if they attend somewhere else. We hope that you can have a similar story where you are so happy to see the happiness and the magic and the wonder in your child from what you have chosen through your values in education. Now we would like to begin introducing our teachers who are fantastic and will share a little bit about Waldorf education and their experiences at Lotus and Ivy with you. First, we're going to introduce Mr. Gay.
My name is Donovan Gay, and I have been a Waldorf teacher for over 20 years, and it's my third year at Lotus and Ivy. One of the things I'd like to share is what I'll be doing next this year. I'm going to be teaching main lessons in class 6, 7, 8, and one main lesson in class 9. I'll also be teaching painting and drawing to 3 different class levels, and I will be doing some language arts, class 5. As a Waldorf teacher, it's very difficult to say sometimes what's your favorite bit of what we do, because when you get engaged and everything's great. But one of the things that I really do enjoy is teaching history. And history is fascinating for me because, particularly when you're teaching history in class, particularly class 7 and 8, because one of the things we recognize as Waldorf teachers is developing critical consciousness. This starts to develop in the children. And last year in class 8, and again, I'll be doing it this year, we did a main lesson block on the dawn of the modern, basically looking at 20th century history. And to help them engage with critical thinking, I always try and give them a picture of both sides. So when we looked at the Cold War, we looked at the West, and we also looked at the East and gave a picture. I showed them propaganda that the West was doing and propaganda that the East Russia was doing, and gave them. And what you can see when you bring children information openly like that is you can see there's those little cogs start clicking over in their heads, and they start asking questions, and they engage in the classroom suddenly changes. And I know when I started that block, there's a lot of information obviously to cover in the 20. There was a couple of the students were a little bit bamboozled because gives lots of information. But after a couple of days, I could see them starting to think, and the questions was constantly bombarded with questions from asking, how did this happen? How does that relate to this? And what they learn with their critical thinking when we're doing history, particularly that main lesson block, what I wanted to give them this idea is this picture of how we got to the point where the world is now. Because, we all know what's happening in the world now, we watch the news, but there's an idea of how did we get from, Roman times, all this, we talk about the past, how do we get here? And what are the questions that we ask? And one of the things that I always go to teach with the children is keep asking questions. If you don't understand something, if you don't understand what's going on, why? Why is it like that? If I, and it even goes as far as even at home, if one has an opinion and dad's different, ask them why. Because sometimes, particularly as they're growing up, we give them information as absolutes. And I find that when we teach history, we give them an opportunity to discover their own thinking through this process of looking at history. And that applies to all the classes at each and different levels. And for me, that is the most rewarding part, is seeing these class 8, for this particular example, the class 8 getting engaged and asking questions. And when they engage in asking questions, they work harder. I mean, if you speak to any of the children that win my method, Mr. Case talks a lot and gives them lots of writing to do. And they all did it. They all actually did the work. It's all done. There was no one who was left behind because they became engaged. They want to know, they want to be involved. And I always feel happy that I've achieved something as a teacher when the children engage like this. So I'm looking forward, hopefully, creating more blocks like that with the classes I'm teaching this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gay. Now we're going to have Josh Gartland speak. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Gartland. I have been a Waldorf teacher for 20 years. This will be my 21st, and this will be my first year with Lotus and Ivy. Extremely excited about jumping into the virtual realm in regard to teaching. I've been in the classroom for the past 20 years, and I grew up an artist. I got an undergrad in theater, in acting, and I was in New York City for a long time doing theater before I decided to transition into something a little bit more practical when interacting with the world. And I've absolutely loved watching the children that I've had and their families grow. My very first class is now, starting their own businesses, starting their own families, getting close to 30 years old. I've got class graduating from high school, and I have all of these different children and families at different stages of their lives keeping in touch with me. The connection that we create with the individual children and their families is remarkable. As Mr. Gay was saying, there is an engagement with the children and the families through the curriculum. And it's one of my absolute favorite things about this work, the fact that, especially when I'm in person, I get to travel with the children through the grades. And so I'm always learning. And so this year I'll be teaching sixth grade, and I'll have to go back to the drawing board and remember, all right, what is ancient Rome about? Okay, here are the sciences again. How am I going to engage with them like that? And so the curriculum becomes alive for me again, and the children can see that. It's not just a teacher dusting off a book and reading by rote and giving them some kind of busy work. This is work that I am fascinated by and engaged with personally. And especially when it comes to the sciences, I think this is extraordinary. The work truly asks the children and the students to engage personally in the work. It is not just a matter of memorizing facts and formulas. We ask them to truly look with their own eyes about what is happening in front of them. What do they see? What are they experiencing? And so it becomes, it's truly about allowing the children to understand that they have agency in their lives. They're not just coming to school and checking off boxes. It's about helping them become aware of the fact that this is their life. These are their lives. And they have active, not passive, agency in it. And they can do whatever they want. And even if it's a work assignment that they don't like, that they're bogged down with all of this extra work, or they're reading a book that they don't enjoy, they're still engaged with it as they're arguing with me. They're engaged in this conversation back and forth. And I find that engagement and active participation invaluable. So really looking forward to jumping in this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gartland. Next, we're going to have Ms. Tesha Brown.
Hello, I'm Miss Tesha Brown, and this will be my third year with Lotus and Ivy. I've been teaching Waldorf schools for 16 years now, and I am so excited to be back with Lotus and Ivy again this year. This year I will be teaching some second grade classes, but with the middle school, I will be teaching physics, seventh grade physics, seventh grade astronomy, seventh grade chemistry, and eighth grade chemistry. And so I feel really wonderful about following Josh because he really gave a good intro into the sciences. And so I have had the opportunity the last couple of years of teaching the sciences with Lotus and Ivy online. And one of the things that I really loved about the experience of teaching the students online has been that even working with the students online, I've found that we have this opportunity to do so much hands-on work in Waldorf education, with Waldorf education. And so much of what comes out of what we're doing together is building and experiencing together. And what I've really appreciated is that the students have used this agency that Josh was mentioning, and they have, in so many cases, taken what we've been doing with our hands-on experiments and added things. They've been innovative and they've been creative and they've made additions to what we've been working on in class. And so I wanted to give just an example. At the beginning of 7th grade physics, one of the first things we do is we make a monochord, which is really a very simple instrument which has just a string attached to a board. It's a little more complicated than that, but basically. And what I've watched in the last couple of years is that some of the students have taken the time to paint it and to make it really beautiful and make it really creative. And some of the students have added strings so that there's 3 or 4 or 5 strings on their monochord so that they then can play songs. And some of the students have actually taken the time to learn how to play songs on their monochord so that they can then show their classmates. And so just that this engagement, it brings this new creative life to the assignments and projects. And so that has been something that I've really loved observing during my last 2 years with Lotus and Ivy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brown. Next, we're going to have Ms. Nicholson.
So, I so echo what my colleagues have already said. And in addition, I mean, I was also, I mean, like my colleagues who've all have much experience. I was a class teacher for 10 years in a bricks and mortar Waldorf school, and I've been with Lotus and Ivy since the start. So going into my 5th year, and it's been great, getting bigger and better, and everything's been, you know, it's growing and new horizons every year. I was reflecting, you know, thinking about, you know, the differences between in-person and online education. And, you know, because I talk about my work to people a lot, and they're always very interested. You know, I know lots of people in the Waldorf movement. I live in the UK, as you might have noticed, and or from my accent. Anyway, people have thought, oh, what's this? I've never heard of this before. This sounds very interesting. They're kind of surprised, and I explain it, and I say, yeah, well, actually, you know, you'd be amazed, like the connections that you can make, even though we're on Zoom. And then I was thinking, actually, we have such great discussions in the class, in the classes that I teach. I mean, I teach classes 6, 7, 8, and 9. Main lessons mainly 7 and 8, but also one for 6 and one for 9. And the students listen to each other so well, they build on each other's ideas so well. And I thought, actually, there is something about the online format which is helpful for that. And I was thinking, actually, unlike a physical classroom, when you're in a classroom, often you might have students, a large number of students. They could be all sitting in rows. They can't see each other. They can see the teacher, but they can't see everybody else's faces. If you're in a Zoom meeting, there's nobody sitting at the front, there's nobody sitting at the back. Everybody can see each other perfectly. Everybody's sort of equal in a way, you know. It's much more of a kind of participatory conversation, and they can, you know, they can look at each other's facial expressions. And I thought, actually, it's one of the best ways I've experienced classroom discussion has been on through Lotus and Ivy, through Zoom classes. So that's been something really magical. And I really noticed how engaged, as Mr. Gay was saying, how engaged the students are, how many questions they ask. You know, sometimes I have to say, right, we need to stop talking now, because otherwise we're never going to get to the new content in this main lesson. There's so many things that they want to share and discuss and bring up. And also the connections they make with each other is so inspiring. They are often, you know, many hundreds or even thousands of miles away from each other. You know, I had one class I taught last year. I was teaching Romeo and Juliet to class 8. And so I had students on the West Coast and on the East Coast. I had one student in the UK, I had one student in India, and I'd given them a project to do. I usually ask them to do some poetry recitation, or anyway, with a play. I said, what you need to do is, in pairs or groups of three, you're going to learn the prologue to Romeo and Juliet, or a scene of your choosing in your group, and then perform it in the final week of the main lesson. So it ended up that there was a group of three, with one child who lived on the West Coast and one in the UK and one in India. And there was a 13-hour time difference between the child on the West Coast and the child in India. But I said, well, you know what? You will be awake for maybe 1 or 2 hours, and you'll find a time. And they did such an amazing job. They chose their own scene. They didn't do the prologue, which was, the one I said, yeah, you can do that, it's fine. They thought, what can we do? What has got 3 characters that won't be super long to perform, that we can all learn and perform? They did such a great job, and I just thought it was so wonderful. They're making connections across the continents, not just across states. It's really, really wonderful and inspiring to see. Yeah, and so many things. I was reflecting also. Tell me if I'm going on too long, Heather, but I just had another thing to think of, and that was the last main lesson I taught last year. It was we were teaching creative writing to class 7, and I'd also taught them at the beginning of the school year. So I taught them the first and the last main lesson, and they said to me, oh, at the beginning of the year, when we were doing all these essays, we were thinking, can we do this? Oh my gosh, I've never done anything like this before. And then by the end of the year, I thought, oh my goodness, I've learned so much. I can't believe. I look at my essays from the beginning of the year and then from the end, and I think, wow, oh my goodness, it's so much better. And I thought, I'm so proud. I'm so proud of them. And I'm also so happy that they have that sense of pride themselves, to realize they really know and they really understand how much they've learned and how much they've achieved. And so, oh gosh, I'm really heartened to see that progress and the connections, and I really hope to see them and many other students with Lotus and Ivy in just a week or two. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nicholson. You brought up such a good point. Not only are our students all over the world, but our teachers are also all over the world. Just here with us today, Ms. Nicholson, as she mentioned, she's in the UK. Mr. Gay is in Spain. Ms. Brown teaches from Canada. Mr. Gartland is in the USA, in Georgia. Ms. Domikos is going to speak in just a little bit. She is coming to us from Florida. Miss Stephanie Packer is also in Spain. So our teachers are worldwide, international faculty right here, just like our students, and they meet the needs of the international students as well. All right, so without further ado, and Mr. Bruce Jackson, who is coming to us from Kenya, and he is next.
Hello, everybody. It's lovely to see you all. As Heather has just said, I'm actually speaking from Kenya, which is in East Africa. My name, as she says, is Bruce Jackson, as you can also see on the screen. And I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to me. It was interesting what Josh was saying about how old some of his former pupils are. Some of mine are grandparents in the meantime. I'm a bit older than some of you may be. I was born in the last century, but that perhaps applies to quite a few of you. But the thing that maybe is a bit significant in my case, I spent most of my education at a Waldorf school, so I'm actually a Waldorf product. So some of the things I'll say in a minute relate to what I observed as a student rather than what I've done as a teacher, which I think is maybe more important. But just very quickly, as I say, I taught in lots of different schools, but before I did all that, I did a degree in computing. And that was such a long time ago. It was basically, I was a pioneer student, and the professors and stuff were pioneers as well. Basically, it was a lot of physics and maths, and then so-called computing on top. But nobody really knew how to teach computing in those days. It was great fun. I did my Waldorf training at Emerson College, and that's where I actually met Mr. Gay. We had a bit of time together there quite a few years ago, and then I went on and continued my training in Germany. So I spent a long time actually in Germany teaching as well, once I'd done a bit of teaching in the UK. Then I moved to Africa. I started teaching briefly in Namibia, and then in Kenya. I taught physically in Kenya for a while, and then COVID came along, so I got my first experiences of teaching online. But then after that, when I moved out of the physical school, I joined Mr. Gay again in Waldorf Ways. So I was also doing some online teaching and also some homeschooling, physical homeschooling in Kenya. So that's about my history in terms of teaching. I'm going to be doing classes mostly in class 8. I've got about 7 blocks in class 8. I'll just briefly say what they are. That's revolutions, geometry of solids, the short story, physics, chemistry, and anatomy. I'm doing physics in both the class 8s. So that should keep me busy for a while. Apart from that, I'm doing class 7 maths. Looking forward to meeting the class 7 pupils. And then a brand new course, which is called Math is Fun. And that's for a group of students from classes 5 and 6, which I'm really looking forward to doing. So yeah, what's special to me about Waldorf? A lot has been said, an awful lot has been said by all the people that have spoken before me, which is great. Some of the things I was going to say, I now won't say, but basically, I think what makes Waldorf very different is that one attempts to teach with pictures. It's really important that the pupil, the student, sees something in front of them, which is comparatively easy if the subject is a physical subject, but it's comparatively difficult if it's an abstract subject like maths. You can't obviously picture something in maths, which is a lot more difficult. Having said that, though, one of the blocks I'll be doing is called Geometry of Solids. We'll be looking at Platonic solids and maybe some Archimedean solids. They're very beautiful objects. And basically, I will be telling them how to make these solids using paper or card and glue, obviously scissors. So you then make a 3-dimensional model of each of the 5 Platonic solids. And if time permits, I'm not sure how long it's going to take some of our students to do that, then we can move on to some Archimedean solids. They're significantly more complicated and there's a lot more of them, but it's just really fun to be able to translate what you can see in 2 dimensions into something physically in 3 dimensions. And it's already been mentioned, obviously we're on Zoom, and so the students can't even actually see the physical 3-dimensional object. They make it for themselves for the first time. So it's really very important that they can picture it and then make it. It's not that difficult, but it's also not that easy. I'll ask the students then if they want to make the objects maybe using something like plasticine, which is quite fun, quite a challenge, and or something like toothpicks, some little sticks, so that they can then make the solids using the edges. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing. Basically, though, I wanted to give a little example. Well, I'll give 2 examples. One from a chemistry lesson when I was a student. This is going back a little while. A teacher called David Lanning, quite a well-known scientist in those days. He had us all sitting in the laboratory, and that's perhaps what makes Waldorf a bit different. The experiments are usually done by the teacher, at least initially, and the students then observe these experiments. And this particular experiment, nobody knew what was going to be happening. At some level, I'm not even sure that the teacher did. But anyway, what happened was he was bubbling into a soap solution, some oxygen and some hydrogen. And eventually he'd got a large pile of bubbles on top of this fairly substantial bowl. He turned off both the apparatuses and moved them away. And then he got a taper, lit it obviously, and touched it to the pile of bubbles. And I suspect those of you who are a bit scientifically inclined will realize that what happened was a huge bang, because oxygen and hydrogen, they combined together to make water. It was very impressive. As I say, I don't know whether he expected it to be quite as loud a bang as that. The blackboard nearly fell off the wall, but it was really very, very impressive. That, as I say, is something a bit more easy to demonstrate with a picture, but I now want to just give one example another teacher of mine, this was actually before I even started in the upper school at Michael Hall, a guy called Hans Gebert. He was doing an introduction, a bit like we are now, but to the students. And I was in the lower school somewhere, and he was telling everybody who was in the hall what infinity is. And infinity, I'm sure most of you appreciate, is a fairly difficult concept to get across. And I'm trying to decide whether to actually do it. I'm going to try doing it, so I'll need to move. What you have to do, I'll tell you to shut your eyes at one point and then to open them again. There's not going to be a huge time between that, but you have to do it when I tell you. So yeah, this guy, Hans Gebert, he went to the front of the hall and he stood on one side. Can't really get very good to one side. I'm going to get to the side. So yeah, I'm going to start walking and I'll say shut your eyes in a minute, and then I'll say open them again. The idea is to show what infinity is. So be ready. Shut your eyes. Open your eyes. I'll come back and sit down again. The object of that exercise is to demonstrate that infinity is basically direction. And if you go off in one direction, you come back along the same line, moving in the same direction. You can partly picture that if you picture a great circle on the Earth. You disappear in one direction through the States, through Russia, and you come back the other side. That's a great circle, but it's just a picture that has been with me, 60 years, I guess, and it's just probably what made me become a Waldorf teacher. Okay, I've said an awful lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jackson. And next we'll have Ms. Packer.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ms. Stephanie Packer, and I am originally from the United States, but currently living in Spain. And I have been a Waldorf teacher for about 15 years, and this will be my second year with Lotus and Ivy. And my colleagues have done an exceptional job characterizing what is quite magical about Waldorf education. And I guess what I would like to share is something that I was reflecting a lot about this summer as I've been preparing my courses. And this coming year, I'll be teaching 3 blocks to the 9th grade. That will be mythology, ancient civilizations, and geology. And I'll also be teaching US history to grades 8 and 9, as well as some classes in grade 4. And I was reflecting this summer at how beautifully the Waldorf curriculum spirals through the content in ways that something that some of you might have seen as Waldorf students in 3rd and 4th grade, 5th grade, may come back now in these 9th grade blocks in a whole new way to meet the shift in consciousness and capacities and questions that are living, of course, with the 9th grade graders as they differ from the younger grade schoolers, and how those elements also mean that those who have been in the Waldorf system from the beginning get to see this content brought back to life and become broader and deeper. And those who are coming new to it have an opportunity to learn about some of these topics that they have, well, they may never have been able to see otherwise in a school setting. So as I share that, one of the images that came to mind for me as well was the beautiful way that the Waldorf content through the grades mirrors the evolution of human consciousness over, of course, our own many years of growth and evolution. And so one of the magical moments that I had in particular at Lotus and Ivy last year was being able to teach geocentric astronomy to 6th graders. And that's a way where we get to bring this experience of learning through one's own experience and through one's own observation, much like Josh was sharing, being able to feel agency in the process, and then really living into the shifts that occurred, stepping into the 7th grade curriculum, where they begin to see how the astronomers during the Renaissance time period came to then see the sky, see the earth, and see all of the other celestial beings from the heliocentric model. And so it's a way of expressing how we like to do things in the opposite direction in Waldorf education, which is give the experience first, give the students the opportunity to live it and to observe it, and then let them be the ones to draw the conclusions out of their own experience. And that's how we preserve what we like to share as the freedom of our students and their experience. So I look forward to meeting at least some of you in my classes and hopefully others in different years at Lotus and Ivy.
Thank you so much, Ms. Packer. Next, we're going to have Ms. Olga Domikos.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you. Good to see some of my students, my fellow colleagues. I have been with Lotus and Ivy since the beginning, and I just love working with all of you, with all my students, getting to know them every year. Try not to cry because I think of them and there's such a connection that I I get teary-eyed. I'm originally from Hungary, but currently I live in Florida. And I raised 3 boys, my 3 sons in Waldorf programs, and I became a Waldorf teacher myself a few years ago. I've been teaching for about 10 years in various roles, a class teacher, subject teacher. I also worked as administrator at the Waldorf school for a while. This year I will be teaching the 5th grade main lessons and 5th grade, 6th grade math and 9th grade algebra. And also one block in the 9th grade, it's called Possibility and Probability, which is a very fun hands-on math block. And that's actually the highlight I wanted to mention. I have a memory from a couple of years ago when I taught the same block with Lotus and Ivy. And as we explored what are the chances of things happening, such as drawing a certain card from a pack of cards, or whether a meteorite is going to hit Earth. So this is really a very practical block because we apply what we learn to everyday situations or possible situations. And I also asked my students to do some research and bring some current events to class. So I asked them to bring a news article, something they read last night or this morning, that involves some kind of possibility or probability. And at first they thought this would be really hard because where do you find those things? And then they realized, well, those things are all around us. Every time you see statistics, there is some possibility, probability. And I think one of their favorite ones was a weather report that stated that it was a 15% chance of rain the following day. So we had all these discussions around what does that mean? Does it mean it's going to rain? Does it mean it's not going to rain? Should I bring an umbrella? Do I even go for a walk that day? Or does it mean it's going to rain a lot? Does it mean it's going to rain a little? So there's lots of discussion and there's lots of meaning that I was able to fill the class with because it's such a practical subject. And that's always my goal, is for my students to see how math is practical, it's useful, it's interesting, it's exciting, and it's a very, very creative subject as well. Well, that was my little highlight. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Domikos.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. If you have younger siblings, we have our open house at 4 o'clock Eastern today for kindergarten through 5th grade. So we hope to maybe see you there. And we hope to see you in a couple weeks. So please do reach out to us if you have any questions, and we'll be happy to work with you. We'll see you soon.